Ongaku Now is on the air. Our first episode of our brand new, let's say show, but it's not really going to be a podcast. It's more going to be just an episodic show. We drop in from time to time to talk all things Japanese music, Japanese anime, and maybe even video games. We'll slide a little bit of everything into this show that will generally air on Wednesday nights, but our first episode airing tonight on a Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern on the Nerdcast Empire. Great to have you along with us, Matt, here in the studio. The topic we're going to talk about in this first segment is whether there's just too much anime being made. That's going to be kind of our question of the week. In the second half, we're going to go through some music, so make sure you stick around for that. And if you are watching on the YouTube VOD, you're going to want to be here live on Twitch because we will not have the videos on the YouTube VOD because we don't want YouTube to nuke our channel. So it'll be a good incentive to join us live on Wednesday nights for Ongaku Now. Joining me in studio for this first edition of Ongaku Now is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going, as always. Yeah, still kind of reeling from the YouTube video regarding the Summer Game Fest or whatever the heck they call it, the Jeff Keighley trailer hour.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII Part 3 Remake, Revelation, I believe it was called. Looks wild. I should probably get around to finishing the first two parts at some point in time, but kind of excited to be talking anime again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. It's been just trying to kind of fit it into the schedule, and we're going to get a chance to do this on a regular basis now. And yeah, if you haven't had the chance to see the game video, basically that just aired, it was about an hour and a half of trailers for things that are coming out, and to varying degrees of excitement based on some of the things coming out. Definitely you want to check that out. Some interesting titles in there, some maybe that aren't necessarily as interesting. Mike may have mentioned one of the more interesting ones as the Final Fantasy VII remake is going to be released in spring of 2027 on all platforms. So exciting news there. I think any chance you see something to get a wide release, I think that's good for the gaming industry.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine playing it on Switch 2. I mean, honestly, it's probably one of those, if you have to be a console gamer, you'd almost want to go after like a PS5 Pro for it, I would think. I mean, just
to max
get
it
the
out.
best performance you can possibly get out of a console. Otherwise, I think PC would probably be preferable to anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that, just to really get the most out of it that you possibly can. But yeah, exciting news for sure. And we'll probably talk more about that when we get to the springtime and it gets a little closer to rolling out. And again, the videos, if you go to the Game Awards channel on either Twitch or YouTube, I'm sure you'll be able to catch the VOD of both on either one of those platforms. So definitely worth checking that out. Our format's going to be a little more flexible on this show compared to our music podcast. Part of that is because this is our first one, so we're kind of figuring this out as we go. And part of it is because the music podcast is something we've done so many episodes of that we've kind of nailed down the format of it. So we'll get to that point eventually here as well. But in this opening segment, just going to kind of talk about some different things that are on our minds, and maybe eventually, if I ever get caught up watching anime, both of us can talk about shows we're watching, but mostly Mike is watching anime right now. Before we get to that, I did want to mention, if people haven't checked it out, I've been getting trailers on YouTube Short for L'Arc en Ciel 35th anniversary.
Wow.
They're doing some shows, obviously, in Japan. I would love to see them come over here. They're one of those bands that we missed out on when they came kind of in the, around the 2010 time when they came over to Otakon. I would love to see them live, and the fact they're still doing it after 35 years is really awesome. So kudos to them.
Yeah, they're definitely one of those bands that if you're an anime fan of a particular age, they're basically royalty.
Yeah.
Like, they're in that short list of just probably the bands that got you into the Anna song side and ultimately J-Rock from being an anime fan. And yeah, that'd be really cool to see live.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure they're going to show up on some of Mike's countdowns. Don't know if they have a song on this one we're going to talk about in a little bit, but they will almost certainly pop up from time to time, especially around the turn of the century. They had some just absolute classic anime songs, so we'll get to that. But again, I want to get a chance to talk a little bit about some of the shows that are going on, some of the stuff you're watching, Mike, because I know you've kind of gotten back to starting to keep up again with anime. So, of the stuff you're watching now, what's kind of been interesting?
Yeah, I try to make it a point to at least watch 4 to 5 shows a season. I'm a little behind on a couple of them right now. I started season 4 of that time I got reincarnated as a slime, but I'm a few episodes behind. Haven't even gotten around to ReZero season 4 yet. I definitely got to get there. Kind of the 2 shows that I've actually managed to stay up to date on. First off, and I was really excited when they announced the season, Ace of Diamond, Act 2, Season 2.
Yeah.
Kind of excited, too. I looked it up on my anime list. Actually got an 8.11 score, which...
Nice.
Well-deserved. I think I don't watch a lot of sports anime necessarily. Not that I don't love sports. It's just not something I get around to all that often. But to me, it's just an incredible show, following this... I would say like phenom pitcher, but he really wasn't initially. Like how he got into this like prestigious school for baseball, I'll never know. But what amazes me about the show is that each season they kind of have like there's maybe like 4 or 5 main schools, and they kind of rotate which one the rival is at that point in time. But it's the kind of show that you feel like if they switch the perspective around, any of those other schools could be the main school in the show too.
Mm-hmm.
Like the character interactions between them could easily be, oh, well, that's the main character, and that's the ace on the team, and it's just really well put together that way.
Yeah, from what I know about it, it just seems like the type of show that really could run forever because you obviously can alternate. As you bring new classes in, basically change the main characters. And like you said, spinoffs would be really easy. All you have to do is incorporate the stories of the other schools in there. And you mentioned not watching a ton of sports anime. For modern anime watchers may not realize this, but for a long time, it was kind of tough to be a sports anime fan because a lot of it didn't come over here.
Yeah.
Or if it did, it was maybe a sub-only release that was thrown on a DVD. And you do have some shows that kind of broke through that, I think Prince of Tennis was one that in fits and spurts kind of made its way over and now has finally kind of years later, they've kind of caught back up with it. Obviously Haikyuu was really big. That was maybe less sports driven and more like just kind of shonen anime, almost battle anime that happens to be about a sport. But
kind of.
Sort of, yeah. I mean,
if you call volleyball a sport,
I mean, certainly a lot of people do. I think you're starting to see some baseball anime make their way in, but there were a lot of very classic baseball anime that never came over here, and
oh yeah,
a lot of them you have a hard time finding legally anywhere here in the U.S. now. So it's been a challenge for sports anime to kind of find its footing over here, and it's better now because so much of it comes over, even if it is just sub only. But for a stretch there, probably 90s, early 2000s, if you were a fan of sports and wanted to watch sports anime, you were probably out of luck.
Yeah. I think what's amazing, too, and even if you're not a sports fan, I think you should watch at least a few anime about baseball because the way Japan honors baseball is kind of how I wish we would here. I feel like we just don't view it the same way anymore, and it's kind of depressing. But watching Ace of Diamond, you can't help but kind of fall in love with baseball again.
Sure. I mean, we're about to lose baseball probably for another year once we have another work stoppage coming up at the end of this year. So maybe that'll be a chance for Japanese baseball to get back on TV over here. But yeah, it is totally a different environment. And obviously there's been some more crossover with guys like Shohei Ohtani and being recognized as, if not the best player in the world, certainly among the top 3 probably.
Yeah.
So that has gotten more American fans, I think, into Japanese baseball. Obviously, Ichiro was, I think, the guy who really kind of broke down those barriers. I mean, there were others, obviously, and we could list them. Yeah, but Ichiro was the guy who was like a star and still plays. I mean, you still see him pitching against high school teams, in his 50s and is still revered. So I think that has helped kind of bridge the gap between U.S. and Japanese baseball. Obviously, the World Baseball Classic has done that as well. Has gotten more people in the U.S. Hasn't just run away with that like you would have maybe thought like in the Dream Team era. A lot of countries are really into baseball. So, yeah, it's Japanese baseball is an experience. It's a phenomenon. Probably should go watch Mr. Baseball too. Maybe less, less timely, but certainly a classic from back in the day. The movie with Tom Selleck in it, talking about his experience in Japanese baseball. So you definitely get an idea of. I don't want to say cult-like because it has a negative connotation, but it does kind of feel like it's kind of the way that college football is revered on the big campuses, but that's the way they feel about their baseball team.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair comparison.
It's just maybe not as many people, but still a lot.
The other show that I've been able to keep up with in its first season is Demons of the Shadow Realm, the newest from Full Metal Alchemist creator Hiromu Arakawa. Obviously, the character designs make you think Full Metal Alchemist. I wasn't really sure what to expect with this show, so you're watching the first episode and it's kind of going one direction, and then they hit you with kind of what the plot of the show is, and it just blows your mind. Like you're just not expecting it. And ever since then, it's been super enjoyable. Really cool characters, and kind of anxious to see where it goes.
Yeah, that sounds like one I would definitely want to check out at some point. I know the 4th season of Classroom the Elite is underway. That's one that I definitely want to get back into. I've really enjoyed the first 3 seasons of that. It does look like one that Crunchyroll is keeping up with dub-wise, which is good because it's one of the few shows recently that I've gotten into and watched exclusively in English really from the get-go, because it was one I picked up a couple seasons after it aired. So kind of unusual situation, but the English cast of that's really, really good, and I've really enjoyed that show. And there's others, obviously, that I've kind of fallen off of that I need to get back into. So I'm really excited about that. And again, that's another kind of reason for this show is just another excuse to force me to start watching more anime, because we're going to talk about it. So my hope is that will kind of get me back into it. It does kind of lead us toward our question of the week. And that is, and what spurred this on, obviously, first off, this is a good time to mention join the Discord. I will, if I can, I'll paste the link in there. I forgot to copy the link before we started the show, but we'll definitely have the Discord link in there on future episodes. But something you brought up as you were going back through, and a little bit later on, we're going to be watching a video of some of your rankings of anime opening songs. And as you went back through earlier years and saw the amount of shows that were released in the off seasons, which I say that now and people don't understand, but it used to be that summer and winter, they just didn't release a whole lot of new shows. And in fact, the season that you shared, there were only 4 new TV shows that season. There were also a handful of continuing shows and a few OVAs, but that was it. And, I was trying to find a graphic for this. I just pulled one of the anime list pages that have the season list and just screenshotted just a small fraction of the shows that are airing this summer and have them up on screen on the graphic. The one list I saw on my anime list, which excluded like kids shows and adult shows, I think was something like 86 or something like that shows in the summertime. So, I mean, that leads us to this question. Is there too much anime being made? And I know anime fans will say, of course not, because, there's anime for everyone. And, no matter what you're into, there's probably certain shows. But the question I posed in the Discord was, are we running into a situation where we just have so much of this stuff that nothing really sticks? There's nothing that is memorable. When you look back at those shows from the 90s and 2000s when there were a limited number of releases, even the one-off shows feel more memorable just because there wasn't as much stuff competing with it at the time.
Yeah, it does kind of make you sound like an old person, and I'm totally one of those as well, saying, yeah, there's certainly way too much of it being made right now. But there's too much of everything being made. I think you're dividing your customer base in so many directions. How can anything be sustainable like this? I saw an article on Yahoo Entertainment from December of last year talking about anime industries, and they call it the profitless boom, where it's like anime is more prevalent in pop culture now than it's ever been.
Yep.
And they mentioned in 2025, just from January to September, you had 8 anime studios shutting down. Like, clearly, whatever they're pushing out there isn't making money. Another stat said at that point in time that 60% of the companies saw either declining profit or losses. So it's just, there's too much product, not enough customers, and I think between not getting enough money from streaming contracts and then obviously piracy as well, it's hard to make money off of this.
And what hasn't helped is, even with all this stuff and anime being popular in the U.S. more so than ever, I think, you have companies like Crunchyroll who are really not doing a great job to serve this market. And what I mean by that is, we've had stories in the past on our podcast about them using AI for subtitles. We've had questionable dub choices, whether you agree or disagree with that. There have definitely been some dubs out there that people have wondered about some of the scripting too. And really the biggest issue for me is not even those two things. It's been the fact that they bought Right Stuff, the major wholesale retailer of physical anime, and have stripped it for parts. And now so much of the anime that comes out, even the biggest shows, sometimes are neither not available physically, or the sets are so expensive that you're priced out of actually owning them physically. And I think that has also really been a detriment to the market over here, in that you can't get that show and have it forever and watch it over and over and really love it. Everything does become forgettable when you're just streaming it on your computer, and then you just click over to the next show and you just move right on to the next thing.
Yeah, Animega's YouTube channel has been doing kind of a long-running documentary series where they're interviewing people who have been in the industry for years. And, in a lot of those videos, they talk about proving that people wanted to buy this stuff on VHS and DVD and kind of the convention culture, and that you basically had super fans that wanted to pay money to own the product. And now we're in a situation where they're taking away a lot of those options. The other part where you mentioned Crunchyroll as well, their user experience on any of their streaming services is just subpar.
Yeah.
Gabe Newell, the guy from Valve and Steam, they talked to him about piracy in the past, and his take on it was that piracy is a service problem. If you provide a better service than the illegal side of it, they'll pay for what you're offering. And I think that's another area where Crunchyroll just misses the boat, where from all reports I hear, sailing the high seas is actually a better user experience than the legitimate way that you pay for. What's that money going to?
Well, and the other thing that's missing when you don't have physical releases, and for those who are of our age that used to collect these things, and we still do when we can, is your DVD releases almost always had outtakes, and they almost always had trailers for other series, and they sometimes would have physical goods that were in the box set, some sort of trinket that you got as part of merch for the show. Like, when you only stream stuff, all that stuff is gone. Like, none of that stuff exists. So now you're literally just giving me the video of it versus this pirate site who also has the video of it, and they also had it out 3 hours earlier, and their video service, for whatever reason, is so much better. Or that you download it from there and you can play it on your own video software.
And I also think there was a time, and you heard this narrative a lot at the convention circuit, talking about how fan subs weren't as good as legitimate ones. And I just don't know if that's the case anymore. I think Japanese language education has become so much easier to get a hold of. I think that's probably not the case now.
Well, and if you're competing against an AI translation, there's a really good chance that you're at the very least as good, because you have the same ability to go to Claude or ChatGPT and try to translate the episode yourself. Sure. Heck, there's probably people out there putting the whole video onto Claude and being like, hey, I want you to translate all this and make subtitles and put it on there, and then it'll spit it out. I mean, I'm not condoning anybody do that, but the options are so much different than they were 20 years ago when, you were going onto torrent sites and downloading them and hoping not to get a virus or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And, I did stop pirating because I felt like we finally got to the point where the U.S. companies over here were giving us the product in a timely manner and were giving us, good service and everything like that. And now a lot of people, I can't say myself because I still don't pirate, but a lot of people have gone back the other direction, that the service and what we're getting over here is so bad that now people are just going back to pirating again.
And it's bad because I generally don't support that kind of behavior, but at the same time, it's becoming increasingly difficult to support the companies that are making you pay more and more year after year for less of a product. And I also think the issue too is that with more money from overseas going into the anime industry, you start running into the concerns that I think the gaming industry has been dealing with. And that's, if you're a fan of Japanese entertainment, you want it to feel like Japanese entertainment.
Yeah.
You don't want them to, in a misguided attempt to appeal to more people, make it less like what it already is. Like, your product has something about it that differentiates it from everything else in the market, and that's what is appealing about it. I look at, in gaming, Square Enix with games like Forspoken or Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Shadows. Those were missteps because they thought, instead of going by their own intuition and saying, hey, what kind of game would people in Japan want? It was, let's forget about them and what's the same person who's playing first-person shooters over in the West? What do they want? And they ultimately end up not getting either side of the gamer base.
And, on top of all of the stuff we just mentioned, when you have a market that's oversaturated and there's clearly too much out there, like Mike said, you have studios shutting down, which, of course, they're not reducing the number of shows when these studios shut down. So what do you do to make up for the fact you now have fewer studios? Well, you either work your animators who are already overworked even more and run them into the ground, and there's any number of stories you can read out there about the mental struggles and the physical struggles of animators just trying to survive, and some of them mentally not making it through this. Or you turn to AI, and you're starting to see a lot of that now. And, of course, there's been some backlash on that as well, and then companies have to come out and apologize. But none of this is good. And again, at the end of the day, you end up with maybe a couple of shows here and there that break through and are memorable and do well. And then you have this whole bucket of shows that nobody remembers, and we just move on. Like, what? It was almost like that was just a waste of time. That we just made that 13-episode show, and nobody's going to remember it. And we didn't make any money off of it, and it was just a total waste of time for everybody.
They can't all be Demon Slayer or Chainsaw Man.
Right.
They just can't. And the question is, how many attempts are you going to put yourself through to try to create the next one of those? When some of these shows, clearly, that's not even, they're not even shooting for that. When you look at what the product ends up being, I don't know. I assume they didn't spend a lot of money on some of them, but you still can't imagine they're making any either.
I think we need to get back to, like, do you want to hire me and give me a whole bucket of darts to throw at a dartboard to try to hit a bullseye? Or do you want to hire one of these British darts guys that are always throwing 180s and give them a couple of darts and let them throw for the bullseye? Let's give the people the talent, give them the opportunity to make great shows instead of saying, we need you to make 10 shows this season. How about we just make one or two really good ones, or adapt the material carefully so that we're getting good stuff out of there instead of just a whole mess of stuff that nobody's going to remember in a few years.
Exactly.
So we'll see how it turns out. I know and we didn't mention any specific shows because there's one person out there who's going to watch this video and say, that's my favorite show. We're not here to say that there aren't some of these shows that aren't enjoyable. I have watched a lot of throwaway shows that are 13 episodes and are gone, but
I don't watch enough shows per season to get around to a lot of those, because some of them you can kind of see what you're getting yourself into. I think they're the obvious. Okay, that show's a big deal. Like, I knew I wasn't going to be disappointed when I picked up Apothecary Diaries.
Yeah.
Like, that show is clearly a huge deal, and it's a tremendous show. Everyone should watch it. But there's any number of other shows when you read the title and you're like, that's not the Apothecary Diaries. No. It's just, the budget probably is nowhere near the same, and I won't enjoy it nearly as much.
No, not at all. So it's a sort through your anime. And that is going to wrap things up for this edition of Ongaku Now, our first edition of this program. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's edition and this VOD on YouTube. Of course, you can join us live on Twitch It'll be every Wednesday night. We'll probably be back on Friday night next week, once again, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Make sure you join us over on twitch.tv/NerdcastEmpire. And, of course, we'll be back on both YouTube and Twitch this Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern, for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. Big thanks to Mike, as always, for all his help with our shows. Big thanks to everyone for checking this out. We'll talk to you again next week for another episode of Ongaku Now. For Mike and everyone else, I'm Matt saying so long. We'll see you next week on Ongaku Now.